Well, hello everybody. I'm back to continue my discussion on my visionary state experiences, and hopefully you've been paying attention to all the videos I'm making. Otherwise, I've got a lot of information to share with each video, and it's amazing how long these take to make, so I'm trying not to repeat too much of this stuff, but just to recap a little bit. What I've shared, is that I've discovered that I've been going into visionary state and experiencing a type of time travel, parallel dimensional time travel. And I realize, people have been trying to tell me about this for the past couple of years. But when it happened, it was very overwhelming to realize that this has been happening for 18 years and I didn't even notice it. But then I started realizing that since this is all only happening in the visionary state, there may be actually no truth to this stuff about like Bill Leeb, for example. Like I was really getting hopeful, like this is my old friend from kindergarten and he's coming back into my life, even though I was still confused about the whole age thing. But this is where I started figuring it out. The reason Billy was only 2 years older than me in the visionary state was because it was only a vision, and then I started realizing all these other things, like when I was put in touch with Bill and he was going as Bob, that could have also just been in visionary state, like seeing Bob over at Dan's house and stuff like that. So what makes this whole thing tricky is I've had to spend a lot of time trying to figure out, okay, what happened to visionary state and what's happening in reality, So, of course, I went over this with my dad and my mom, and they didn't remember Billy, and I thought they knew who he was, because I remember them taking me over to Rosie's and stuff. So, and then I've mentioned in another video, I discovered the names Baldus and Van Vieren. This name was used throughout my visions to tie it together with Bill Leeb, but then I find out these are really only two different people's last names, so I was confronted gently by my landlord not to bother these people anymore, right? So it was looking like there's a good chance Bill Leeb doesn't even know who I am, because I was going to Mind Phaser and I wasn't getting anything helpful. So I caught on that my friend Charlie was kind of catching on that I thought he was involved with Frontline Assembly. So he was playing into it, and he might have been going on there and doing stuff. So stuff like that, with people trying to add in and, and make things worse. So it was really hard for me to tell the truth from the delusion. So now it's starting to get kind of scary. I'm like, well, if this isn't Bill Leeb, then who is it? Who's the guy in the red hat and all this stuff? And it's like, well, some of the stuff we got to take into consideration is, again, I was smoking pot while it was illegal, but I was probably dealing with such small amounts that it wasn't too bustable. So when you're at that level, sometimes undercover detectives will monitor people. Because I had another friend who was a pot dealer, and they monitored him for a good 2 years before they caught him, because I told him what was going on, and he said could just be, the Denver Police Department for all we know. Like some cameras came up around my building, and I'd seen those two characters going in the electric room. And I was telling about that story, I found that my shirt was missing, but then I also found it put back in my apartment. So it's as if, the landlord might have been working with the police, because they did warn me a couple of years ago when they were showing the apartment that, they had come to show a possible tenant and I could smell the marijuana. So they just warned me not to do it, or they're going to have to kick me out and report me. So anyways, I was hanging out with this guy named Jeremy. I met him when he was going to art school. And his parents work for the federal government, but they're just part of FEMA. However, Jeremy went through a divorce with a woman who he accidentally got pregnant. And so the woman was coming after Jeremy. And, well, I think somebody from the DA's office came by to visit us right while we were smoking pot. And she said, that's not what I'm here for, so you don't have to worry about it. So she comes in right after we smoked pot to talk to Jeremy about like I don't know what you call it, like when you have to pay child support. Okay, so he needs to start paying his child support, or they're going to take away all of the custody and all this stuff. And here we are smelling like pot. And then when I got Jeremy's mom on the phone, because I was tired of him staying at my house and bossing me around, so I called her up one day and I'm like, man, is there any way you could get Jeremy to come back to your house? And they're trying to tell me it's my fault that he's ruining his life because I'm letting him come over to my house and smoke pot. So I kind of thought, these people could have turned me in. And then there was this crazy lady that ended up moving in next door. So later on, the landlord told me about her. She was kind of a friend of the family that they moved in there, but she has a mental condition where she's always spouting off at the mouth. And one of the things she would spout off about was that she'd see all these guys coming and go into my apartment, and for all I know, she might have reported me for smoking pot. And so that right there tells like if I felt like somebody was watching me, it could have been just the smoking pot thing. But the thing is at the same time I was also doing the visionary state stuff, so it could have been just a mere coincidence that made it look like something bigger was going on, like maybe so anyways, I'm going to get into what I thought was going on, right? So I started reflecting on some of these conversations, where like my friend Jason. So the thing about when I'm going into visionary state, for one thing, I was told in the visions by Jason that those aren't really my friends and family. Those are people being played by characters. So Jason seemed to know a lot of stuff, but I think he also started making me paranoid by telling me, he thought he saw somebody following me one day. Like we went to the movies, somebody sprayed something on me, or somebody was trying to record me with a little camera under their sunglass lens. And he started planting seeds of paranoia. But the thing is Jason's kind of he's a liar and a joker. He's kind of a jerk. Now I started remembering a lot of the stuff he told me, all the different forms of surveillance and this and that. And then I started remembering something about the girl in the story, kind of like maybe the story my dad was telling had something to do with she's finding out she's part of an experiment. And so the thing is I've read up on this stuff. Like I've never seen it firsthand that I know of, unless they did try it on me. But it's called being a targeted individual, and they pick people that are usually loners and usually people that are undesirable, not somebody that is important to anybody, somebody that no one's going to miss. And I hate to say it, but that seems to describe myself, right? No one's going to miss me. I'm not important, and I'm an undesirable person, so I'm a perfect target. However, their program is so crude, everyone's catching on, because what they're doing is they're just kind of broadcasting into your head so you feel like you hear somebody talking in your head. And so it's really not that impressive. I might have noticed something like that when I was living with Lynn and Jeremy. I was saying something like, I feel like I better stop smoking pot, to get the attention off me. And I thought Jeremy said something like, that sounds like a smart idea. And then later on he's like, I didn't say that. So it was kind of putting words in people's mouths. So I almost thought maybe Jeremy was an undercover all this time, because then I started remembering the tactical neural implant article and that little implant in the picture. And I started thinking, what if I have one of those in my right eye, because that's my weaker eye? And I was telling my friend Chris Smith, I said, oh my God, I think I'm under surveillance. I think they've put an implant in my eye and everything. And I was putting together that Jeremy has one too, because when he was talking about he was a little boy, the government took him away from his parents for about a week and then gave him back, and he doesn't know why. And somehow I put together that he's got an implant from them. So who knows? Maybe they were in the process of making us like agents without knowing about it. And funny thing is around the time all this stuff was coming together for me, I was going down to the record shop, and always going in there and looking for something. And Richard Kirk had an album called Agents with False Memories. So I'm thinking I probably bought that and thought, that's a good title, because that explains maybe that's what they're making us into, So I'm getting all these false memory implants, so I've talked about this over my videos. The tactical neural implant could be this alien implant, or it could be, having these false memories added to my lifeline, my timeline as a form of a memory implant, kind of like that movie. Oh man, I already forgot the title, but Bill Leeb sampled it too. Had bad childhood? We can fix it. So they give you memory implants. So something my friend Jeremy did say to me is like, Jody, you hardly ever talk about your actual life. You spend so much time talking about these visions, I mean, can you tell us anything about your actual life? Who knows? So the thing is I have gotten in touch with a few other people, like I mentioned before, my kung fu teacher, Master Tay. He's had some pretty traumatic experiences in his life. So, when he was talking to his teacher, Master E, and he was telling him that he had been going into visionary state, Master E told him it's probably, how we cope when we're going through a traumatic experience, and it puts you out of your body. And then I was talking to a lady from the Hopi reservation named Janice, and I told her about it. She goes, man, I'd really hate to be you or have gone through whatever you've gone through, because what it is, it's a form of putting you out of your body, because you don't want to be in this body and deal with this reality. So I've done a lot of speculating, like, why is this happening? Because, I couldn't forget Bill Leeb, right? It's kind of like that time when I was letting my friend Dan stay with me. He was trying to tell me about Baldus and saying, I used to play with him when I was 6 years old in Rosie's backyard down in Key West. Don't you remember? I'm like, I can't think of it. He goes, well, Jody, you're awfully forgetful. And it's like, well, I didn't forget him. I just didn't put Baldus and Billy together. So, so the reason I remembered Billy, I mean, he kept saying it, don't forget who I am, or you may never see me again. I've heard that over and over. So yeah, I remembered him, but like, I don't understand, why I was being directed to him, and just to find out he doesn't know me, and he probably doesn't want anything to do with me. And so that's where I've been like still trying to figure it out. Like after all these years, 24 years later, I'm still kind of stumped. And so I like to think, again, it just has to do with me, I've always wanted to get into the music business. Maybe it's just saying this is the community I belong to. This is the family I belong to, and this is, a good person to use in my visions because of our likelihood of meeting, whatever. But it had me thinking Bill Leeb lived upstairs, and that's what really burst my bubble, is being taken aside. No, he doesn't. And so one day we were coming up to the building. I think maybe I had Chris Smith with me, and just before I came through the front entrance or the gates off of the sidewalk there was this woman hanging out with the security guard. She almost looked like she could be Carol Ann. She's kind of a small lady with blonde curly hair and glasses, so I'm not sure. I mean, it's so long ago, but it's like she could have been Carol Ann for all I know. But they stopped me and said, excuse me, but we heard you thought there's a rock star living in the building. I'm like, oh yeah. I said, I was telling my roommates that because I wanted them to think I'm crazy so they'd move out. Right? So I was really kind of like wondering, why did you have a security guard with her, And so I was kind of feeling like, even though there's no Bill Leeb, and Baldus and Van Buren are two different people's last names, it's not really a person, there's still something going on. So I mean, I've been trying to figure this out anyways. And so so there's a couple of things like, are these experiments real? If so, whatever's been happening to me, I think it's way more advanced than what these targeted individuals are experiencing. But then I started remembering, in the visionary state, I went to get my hair cut at the building that was just north of our building. And they were telling me the U.S. Army were looking for me, and, they came from Michigan to find me to look into whatever information I might have. So they wanted to know what information I had. And I just thought it was weird that the person cutting my hair knew that, but then in reality, I went up there to get my hair cut, and after the fact, it was like major deja vu. And after I finished up and went home and everything, of course, I started remembering, oh, that's right. he told me that U.S. Army was looking for me. And so my grandma's, well, let me see, my grandpa Smith went to war. He was in the Army, and my Uncle Don went to the Marines. And I was going to say about my grandma Smith is maybe she had information they didn't want to get out, because later on she told me, that when my Uncle Don was overseas, they were experiencing foot rot, and her and her doctor tried to help them because they had sent pictures and stuff. So they came there to confiscate her pictures, right, of this foot rot problem. And so that might be, a small example of how, like, my grandma had information that they didn't want her to have, and that's why they confiscated those pictures. But at the time, I didn't know that yet. And then I've talked to other people who, like, their parents had been in the military, like this guy we used to call Dark Mark. Well, he was on SSI for a mental condition where he always thought people were kind of conspiring against him and stuff. And it had something to do with his dad being in the military, and maybe when somebody has too much information, they kind of monitor these families and do things to fuck up their kids. So it was kind of giving me the idea, like this guy Mark was saying he thinks the military did something to fuck them up, so to protect their information. And then there was another guy named Tripp, similarly, was a military kid, had spent some time in Germany on a military base there. Anyways, he ended up going to prison for killing somebody, so he was really crazy. But he's like the only other person I've met who said they knew a rock star when they were a kid. And he had a mental condition, possibly due to, the military may have fucked him up to make sure he doesn't share any information. So that's when I started wondering if maybe the military did something to fuck me up, because I was thinking about, like, they can come to your house when you're sleeping, like they use infrared so they can see in your house. And they can spray stuff into your window. So if that didn't happen in Denver, it could have happened in Big Fork. It could have happened in both places, because those could be the chemicals that are inducing these visionary states, and it could be designed to make the targeted individual go crazy, so that way they'll end up incarcerated, institutionalized, or maybe even suicided, see? So, all this stuff was sinking in, like, hey, maybe that's what they're trying to do to me, and so, like, I started reflecting on, like, okay, there was that connection with the Navy base, seeing Bill Leeb on the Navy base, so that's, again, would have been something in the visionary state that didn't really happen, but trying to put all that together, so I read up a little bit on UFOs and all that. Like, this one particular book I had, it really went on and on and on about how the Navy's, like, on top of UFOs. They know all what's going on, and they have a lot of secret programs, So that's when I started wondering if maybe, there's a secret program with the Navy where, they've had their eye on me since at least 6th grade. And maybe they've investigated me, because as soon as I graduated, the Navy were calling me up and inviting me to join, which I figured they just do that to everyone. And I was telling them I don't think I'm qualified, because first of all, I was smoking pot, and I didn't think I'd pass their physical if I wanted to, And then I mentioned it to Rosie years later, that's funny, they called me up and they wanted me, and I figured they'd just call anybody. She goes, no, they called you for a reason. They know who you were. So that kind of adds a little paranoia that the Navy knew who I was. I was going to Taekwondo, and I was training alongside people who were in the Navy. So, but yeah, and I was talking about the marijuana thing. Like, when I went to Key West, I don't know if it's correct, but I almost thought my friend Nathan warned me never to buy pot from his father, and I was putting that together. So maybe it's just the police, or maybe it's something bigger, maybe if we're time traveling, they're watching us, or maybe they're the ones causing it, and so, like, so this sounds pretty crazy. Like, this is the type of stuff when people have symptoms of psychosis, symptoms of paranoid schizophrenia, this is the stuff they talk about, is they think they're being monitored, or they think, people are playing tricks on them, like going in and out of my apartment, taking that shirt and putting it back. And then later on, it looked as if some people came into our art studio up in Boulder, And a couple of things I was worried about, like the camera was taken down before they came in, and the lock wasn't working right, because when you use a master key, sometimes it messes with your tumblers and makes it a little rough. And then my long underwear, my favorite pair, were gone. Like everything was there but my long underwear. So just really funny stuff. Like, and I thought Bill Leeb stole my underwear or something, but it wasn't him. It could have been some undercover cops. Might have investigated us and thought, I could use those. I don't know why they would take something like that, but just a funny thought. Just things that make you paranoid, because you're seeing connections, like, like living in that warehouse space. When I saw that camera gone, I started remembering, I was warned about the camera. So that would have been like 2004, so like 4 years after this stuff started happening. I thought it was all ceasing down, like everything kind of went quiet, so like, anyways, there's a couple things to take into consideration. One, we were smoking pot, could have got the cops called on us. Pretty normal stuff. And then the U.S. Army could have been looking for me, so that could have just been in a visionary state. But where it ties into reality is my grandma told me years later that they've come to her house. The Marines actually came to her house to confiscate those pictures my Uncle Don sent, and maybe there's a couple other things she knew about she wasn't supposed to tell people. But then, like, the time travel and all that stuff, like, I was trying to put all this together, like, is there any chance that there are any kind of, like, intelligence programs out there to monitor music? So they might just monitor what's going on and then use that to find stuff out. So I kind of got the impression maybe they were working with Frontline Assembly, or maybe they were working with Skinny Puppy, like, especially after that band member died. They might have been working with somebody to help bust heroin dealers. I don't know. I mean, it could have been some intuition there about how having a band member die of a heroin overdose could have attracted attention from, undercover agents trying to help work through our music scene. But then I also started thinking, what if intelligence agencies have created Frontline Assembly and there's no such thing as Bill Leeb because he's just an actor, and I was made to fall in love with a fictional character. Like, there's nobody named Bill Leeb. This is one of the Navy special programs, like I was told in '98. I went over to see my dad's landlord, and she said that I'm part of a special program, and that's why I was introduced to Billy, And then back in, I don't know if it was 7th or 8th grade, but this was probably after we went to the career day on the military base, where I thought I saw Bill Leeb and all that, and I had this lady take me aside, and she's like, I know what kind of music you listen to. And she was telling me she had a kid in my taekwondo class, and she was like, I know what kind of music you and your dad listen to. And she's like, you better be on your best behavior, like, you're part of a special program, so that's where, I was like going, am I part of a special program, so that's where you're just going, okay, Jody, you really need to lay off the acid. Hello, you sound crazy, you sound delusional. So here I am thinking I've got an implant in my eye. I'm thinking we could be part of a Navy special ops program. Maybe the U.S. Army are investigating me to make sure my grandma didn't tell me too much. But then at the same time, we're also living at the Acacia, which is on the haunted house tour every Halloween, right? And so the reason the building is haunted, according to the story, there was a time when all the big wigs were keeping their mistresses at this building, and some of these women will commit suicide once they realize they're being abandoned by their boyfriends, because they're usually married men who go back to their wife and quit seeing their girlfriend. And so I thought, that ties in with the narrative about Bill Leeb, because similarly, he was a married man who wanted to be married and have a mistress, which is why he ended up dating Amelia Bentley and ending up getting divorced. So that did happen in reality. But with me, it was making me think, someday this person's gonna marry me. And then when I find out he's not gonna marry me, it was really depressing. I'm just like, I feel so embarrassed for the fact that I got tricked into it and ended up admitting that I believed that I loved him, right? And I do believe I love him. I mean, it doesn't mean I should marry him, but I'll definitely be his friend and give him a hug next time I see him. And so I thought, well, maybe it's this building, because this building is haunted, and maybe this is a big part of my problem. And so I was going over to my friend Jim's house. Now Jim's this big, he's like half black, half Lakota, and I made friends with him when I first moved to Colorado, and I was living at that place on Pearl Street. So I could hang out with him because he was pretty open-minded. He was a little bit clairvoyant himself, and I was telling him what was going on, and he says, Jody, it sounds like you're being brainwashed. And he let me come and stay with him. So that's when I realized that's where my time trip ended. Once I started staying at Jim's house, I woke up back in November, and I was confused because I'm like, how come I'm back here, and how come Lynn and Jeremy are here? I thought these guys moved out on me. I thought I moved to Jim's. And so after I moved to Jim's, I was coming out of the alley because now I was working at Nicolo's Pizza. I had dyed my hair red, and I was hoping nobody would bother me anymore, but it was like a really busy traffic day, right? I thought I saw Bill and Jared sitting across from the alley, just sitting there. And I didn't know who Jared was yet, but he had long curly hair. And they were just sitting there like with their legs folded in Indian style, and they were both kind of looking at me, and I wanted to cross the street so bad to check them out, but it was like I was running late for work. The traffic was really heavy, and I would have to go down and over the crosswalk and all this stuff. So I don't know, I guess I kind of chickened out. But that was probably just a visionary thing. And then I found these nice pair of sunglasses outside of Jim's apartment, and so I went to get those and try those on, and I thought I heard somebody in the distance yell, Baldus! And so since I had been living with Jim, I started driving taxi, and I left those sunglasses in my cab, probably with the door locked even, and they turned up vanished out of there. And so that's when I started wondering if that's what Jason's talking about. Sometimes they take a computer chip and they implant it, and they use it for surveillance. I started wondering if those glasses were surveillance. And then my friend Chris was living up in Greeley, which is like an hour drive north, and they had a house where they rent out rooms. So that's the thing. I ended up going up there because it was like $200 a month. So I was paying extra money for gas to drive up there, but I drive down to Denver or Boulder to do taxi for the next couple of years. And I really think that everything simmered down for quite a while. So I was kind of left to chew on this for so many years and try to understand what happened to me, because I think it's exciting that I'm going to visionary state and that I'm able to see time travel and everything, but I don't understand why, Bill Leeb is being used to torture me, So if you've been listening to my stories, it took like 18 years for me to to convince me to believe Bill Leeb might be in the area and that he had been in the process of falling in love with me all my life, and then someday he's going to come and ask me to marry him. And so the reason for that was because it's like he's a time traveler and he's being watched, so he didn't want to get caught trying to contact me according to the narrative, okay? And so he would come and ask me to marry him because he already knew me by the time he did that, and it wouldn't even give me a chance to like date him or anything, It would just boom, show up. And the thing is one of those visionary slips, my friend Jeremy, the know-it-all, was telling me, because I'm just like, well, I was getting frustrated because Bill Leeb wasn't coming to me. So in the visionary slip, I had realized, something's going wrong here. And he said, no, he says it's gonna be another 19 years, and then they're gonna contact you in your backyard of your house. And he said band members too. So weird, and I thought my house, and so now I'm in that house. So in 2019, I started remembering that. Now, I made friends with this girl named Teresa because she was hanging out with Bill Leeb one day when I called his phone, and so he told her about me, and so me and her stayed in touch ever since. And so Teresa did visit me in 2018, so it increased the likelihood, because she came out and said, did you know Jeremy died? So I didn't know, like, if it was just a coincidence, like she has her own thing, because they're saying they don't talk anymore. But I was paranoid that Teresa was investigating me, and that in 2019 I was starting to have some good flashbacks that, it seemed like it could make it possible. So some of the stuff kind of affects me to this day, so I kind of believe it's over. I could have more visions later, but like stuff like feeling like I'm under surveillance. I've often wondered if there's any truth to that and why and stuff. So like that's really paranoid stuff, and it's really disturbing and disappointing and all this. But at any rate, if I'm to the point where I'm not that paranoid anymore, I wouldn't be making these videos. But like back in 2000 and for those 2 years, I felt like moving out of Denver. I don't know if that removed some of that attention, but at the same time, I was going on the internet a lot more and going to Mind Phaser, and I ended up butting heads with everybody on there because I was trying to explain how I got interested in Bill Leeb, and everyone was, kind of chewing me out and telling me I sound crazy, and of course, it didn't really seem that Bill Leeb was present at all, and eventually somebody told me that, Bill Leeb's married to Carol Ann. I'm like, oh, that explains everything, and to be honest, I just think, when I met them back in 1998, and we were all standing shoulder to shoulder at the Netherworld bar, at the Cafe Netherworld, if those guys would have just been like upfront with me, like, that they're married and they got my letter, we could have had a small chat about the whole situation. It would have nipped it in the bud, but because they played aloof and she ran a smear campaign and we just didn't communicate, that made plenty of room for misunderstandings, and it made plenty of room for this to unfold in such a way that it did. And I just feel like it's all because, like people try to tell me, they're like, does she really think Bill Leeb is doing this to her? No, I don't. This isn't Bill Leeb's fault. It's like a thing of its own, and the only reason he's in my story was because he was put in my story. It wasn't my idea. I'm just trying to tell you guys what I remember. But thing is what was I gonna say about that? It's because of Bill Leeb's personality. So everybody's personality gets used in my visions. Like my friend Jason, he's kind of a big liar and a joker. So he was the one that tells me all that weird stuff about Bill Leeb, and he's a sugar daddy, and he's sniffing coke, and he's going bald, and then telling me that Bill Leeb lives in my apartment building, and then I'm finding out, So by the way, that guy with the red hat, if that wasn't Bill Leeb, that could have been an undercover cop, And so that's why, me not being in touch with Bill Leeb, like, made lots of room for, like, what if that was Bill Leeb? I had no way to talk to him, stuff like that. And so the way I tried to resolve this is like, okay, if this stuff was trying to, like, turn me against Bill, for example, so I was in my apartment one day, and I was crying my eyes out. I was just so upset. Like, why is this happening to me? Why are they doing this to me? And it's just like that video for Isolate by Frontline Assembly. The bed was up against that wall, and there was somebody outside my windows. I mean, I was in there, I had my head down like this, but I looked up and I saw somebody in the middle window, and it looked like the guy with the red hat saying, "Some people are assholes. I say kill them all and let God sort them out." And that's when I thought, if that ain't Bill Leeb, is this part of some weird little mind control thing? Because later on I heard that's what the Columbine tragedy was, is that the kids were mind controlled, And so if they're trying to make me Bill Leeb's enemy, the way I want to deal with that is like, I don't want to be Bill Leeb's enemy. I love him, and I want to be his friend. And if I could stay in contact with Bill Leeb, that way, I know where he is, and that way, like, if I have a question, I can ask him. Now, he hasn't been able to answer a lot of these questions, like, maybe because, he wasn't there, and he, the answer is no, so no answer doesn't mean no, but at the same time, Frontline Assembly were in Denver around 98 into 2000, because Chris Peterson was seeing Lisa from Fashion Nation. In fact, I think when my dad was in town, my dad, and Chris were crossing the street, and we saw Chris Peterson driving her blue and white bug, and then another time I was out back spinning my weapons. I had a triple section staff one day, and I almost dropped it because I looked over, and I swear I thought I saw Chris Peterson go by, and the way the sun was glaring off his big shiny forehead, I almost dropped my weapon. So, so I added some possibility, some likelihood to the story that Bill Leeb was in town and that Bill Leeb was checking me out. Maybe he wanted to know who I was, but since it turned out that he was married, that's why he didn't want to get caught. He didn't want Carol Ann to know he was curious about me, and so he's done everything he could to deny it, up to and including letting me eat shit all these years. But he's kind of made it up to me, because lately, I've been able to reach out to him, and it's like, yeah, you're welcome to stay in touch, just don't expect much in return. So I've been able to share all this stuff with Bill Leeb. I feel like I know what's going on. And if I need to, I can call him, right? So, I mean, we're not good friends. I'd like to think maybe we're just acquaintances, but he knows who I am, and I think he likes me more now that he's gotten to know me. And so inevitably, I mean, what's not to like, you know? So, because last time I talked to Bill Leeb, I just felt like kind of reminded me of an old friend of mine from the Shaolin class who would say, hey, I really hope you're doing good, and I hope everything's working out. I felt like, I felt like the last couple times I seen him, by the way, I also asked for a hug, because it's like I may never see him again. And then I moved to Montana, so I haven't seen him ever since 2007, 2008. And you know what? He gave a good hug. It made me feel like he definitely doesn't hate me. There's a part of him that really appreciates hearing from me, even though it's craziness. But he really has nothing in return, It's like he got married to this lady back in 1982. They split up for a little bit, and they're back. So he found his life partner. So obviously, not gonna show up and ask me to marry him. So don't have to worry about that. But I like to think Bill Leeb will live long enough. If I ever get a project together, like if I'm ever that artist that will just emerge on my own without any help. Uh, Maybe Bill Lee will live to see the day, and so I would send him an album just so he could listen to it. And I don't know. I mean, I've been in contact with Reese Folber's dad, and I told him, a little bit. And to be honest, I think it'd be kind of cool just, like the only reason I'd want them to be involved on my album, like if I make a good album and, and I get those guys involved in the final production, it's not because I want to use their name. It's because of the karmic connection. Like I really want to share my success with them as an artist. Like say if I end up doing something really great, I just want to share that success and that experience with them. And so so that kind of helps, give me a nice goal. Like even though this sounds so delusional, I still feel like I've always wanted to make music, and this time I'm going to go to Denver. I'm going to work on this, and it's just nice to think because of Facebook, I got Bill Leeb's wife on there, Carol Ann's on my Facebook, a couple other people, so Ray Folber is Reese's dad, and so like I have plenty of people at my fingertips, like Christopher Lawrence, John Double Fleming. As soon as I'm able to write some dope music, I've got several people I would share that with, and hopefully the best thing I could do to make Bill Leeb happy would be to make some more good music. Because if you know anything about Bill Leeb, he's a big music collector. I think he's the true music and art lover, and I would be happy to know that he's heard my album and he enjoyed it, and if he told me that he likes to play it in his car on the highway or something, just like I tell him I like to listen to his music in my car. I like to spin my nunchucks, the noise unit, instead of learning on the keyboard. I learn it on my chucks, So I don't know. I mean, at any rate, there was a big letdown when I figured out that Billy only existed in the visionary states, and that Bill Leeb in real life probably isn't that interested in me. But there's still potential for us making a connection as long as I quit procrastinating and make some music. So anyways, hopefully by the end of the summer I'll be back into Denver and I'll be able to set up the studio. And then when people ask me what inspired me, well, I grew up listening to industrial music, but at the same time I've also been having these very magical experiences of going to the visionary state. Now when it comes to being part of the industrial music community, I really don't think people should be laughing at me for this. I think having weird experiences like this should actually be normal, like going into visionary state, experiencing the paranormal. If you look at Genesis Peorge of Psychic TV, Psychic Awareness, and the psychedelic experience, then Stephen Malander of Cabaret Voltaire loves to talk about the paranormal. Chris and Cozy have always believed in magic and applied it to their music. So like the people that I think are important to the industrial music community are all people that are major advocates for psychic awareness and magic in the true sense. And I just think that what I'm experiencing is a very industrial music kind of thing, going to the visionary state, having Bill Leeb try to kick my ass, and being woken up to this alternate reality, and being woken up to the possibility that I could be making music because I have access to the same thing that a lot of my favorite artists do. Okay, so at any rate, let me wrap this up. I mean, I wanted to share how I was disappointed, but at the end of the day, there's probably a good purpose for this whole thing. So let me come back and I'll share a little bit more about how, what made this so believable and what I've had to do to just sort of like sort it out and put it all in perspective. So that way you can understand why I'm not just a dummy. This is being really well done, very intelligent, and very humorously. So you betcha. So my guiding spirits or aliens, or if not just Satan, could it be Satan? Well, you know, that's a good question, because how many times have you seen pictures of Bill Leeb with his big wrinkly forehead? Well, if Bill Leeb is satanic, that explains everything. Then I can just forget about it and move along. And well, maybe I'll just quit making this video series now that I've got it all figured out. It was just Satan and a story. Just kidding. I'll be back with at least another 100 videos. I'll talk to you soon.